be it, whether a mooring buoy, if the weather is good enough for a mooring buoy, the weather should be good enough for an anchor. If they can't hold themselves there for a day or two at their anchor, having a mooring buoy set up out at CRC is just asking for trouble for some boat getting smashed into the rocks 4 years from now because somebody tied up to a mooring buoy thinking that it will sink water. And that, so I'm perfectly happy to not have the bloody things out there. Sorry, it was Gary and then Allison.
Yeah, just for clarification from Councillor Fast, what are you saying about the APC?
There's no denial of public access.
There's no denial of public access.
Or private, no limiting of private access versus
The APC
public.
wouldn't do that ever, but.
Okay,
so-
then I read it wrong. My
Okay.
apologies.
All right,
Don't
thank you
look
for
at
the
it again.
record.
Allison?
What's the definition of moorage, Daniel? I can't get into the land use bylaw. Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can pull it up and.
I'm just concerned that moorage also means anchoring. But,
Well, we don't have control over that for temporary use, that's a
So
navigable water.
moorage means the tying of a vessel to a wharf, buoy, or a similar object that is anchored to the bed of the sea.
Right.
okay, so you can still
You
anchor.
could still anchor.
And my other point with mooring buoys, if they're installed properly, the chains don't drag. So,
Yeah, but we don't have any rule about that. And
Um, I think we're ready to call the question on this one. Those in favor of the motion as it
It needs
appears.
to be moved and seconded.
Somebody has,
Yeah, or sorry,
I'll move
move as written.
as written. Yeah.
Yes,
Second.
seconded. All those in favor? Okay, those opposed? Okay, so noted. So it's a 4-3. I think we've been here before.
Surprise, surprise.
Okay, so that's 3.4. Now we're going on to 3.8. 3.8 is fish.
At last.
You didn't have anything else to do this week, did you? Okay. Where are we at on this one, Emma?
I think in response to a question from Councillor Morse about why this is being brought forward at this time, the trail covenant is or was offered as part of the variance application for 1160 Applestone Road. The applicant has expressed that he would like to withdraw the trail offer. So I am waiting for this to be confirmed in writing. But as far as the covenant as being part of the variance application, it is my understanding it will be withdrawn. So when the application comes for consideration at December 11th council meeting, that will be made clear in the report to council. And the timing for bringing the trail covenant to council today was to facilitate the consideration of that variance application. So if it is in fact withdrawn, then there is no urgency to consider this covenant. And it is also my understanding that the applicant would like to revise the offer of the trail covenant in exchange for the land that the encroachments are on. That is also to be confirmed in writing, but at this point, that is the status of this trail covenant.
So it's completely up in the air.
so one other question, the report deals entirely with section 219 covenant, but what you gave us was a statutory right-of-way under section 218, so I'm quite confused as to why the report keeps referring to section 219, and I'm sure the public might be confused too.
I will need to get legal clarification.
Well,
As well.
the right-of-way says, under section 218, right in the right-of-way document, the draft, so,
Maybe it's a typo. I think it's moot at this point, Councillor
yeah,
Morris.
okay, well, that's, I'm just gonna say, if this comes back to us, it's in section 218 we're talking about. And all the other questions will come up next week.
I would like to defer this recommendation until and unless.
Well, I think it's actually withdrawn, isn't it?
Well, there's a motion in our agenda sheet, so how do we deal with that?
So we consider a DVP, we normally would not consider a DVP if a property is not in compliance with our bylaws, right? So,
That's a debate we have to have, and I don't think that's an accurate statement.
That's correct. Councillor Morse is correct.
okay, so that becomes an issue for discussion as to
Yeah,
whether or not we even consider a DVP when we have a property that is out of compliance.
That becomes a council decision. What I was speaking to a couple weeks ago was the issue that staff cannot preclude bringing forward an application for council's consideration because of an encroachment issue. Council just needs to consider whether they are going to consider that variance. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so that becomes issue number one.
So with the recommendation that's in our agenda, do we just simply
Not proceed with it.
not proceed with it, and that's that?
Okay, and Gary, you want to speak to this?
I think we have to look at the bigger picture here. One of them is if his garage was not non-conforming and on civic property, the variance would be treated quite differently.
This is a discussion for next week.
Yeah, this is a discussion for the discussion, right? I mean, this is...
Well, I guess it is a discussion for the discussion, yeah.
I think maybe one thing we might deal with today is whether or not we wish to refer to legal counsel what our options are as far as dealing with the right-of-way itself.
Agreed?
If we're going to spend money on this thing, I'd like counsel to say, go to the trouble of spending money.
So the interpretation of the community charter versus the land title
Yeah,
act,
what are,
the other easement, et cetera.
yeah, what are, we need basic information going into the discussion.
We've already sought legal opinion on some of this issue. It's a complex issue. I would certainly recommend that our lawyer is up to speed on this issue, and that we present a legal opinion to council at a closed meeting at the next meeting.
Okay.
We usually
Do
do many
you need a motion on that? No, okay. So
May I
that's what-
offer,
No, sorry, this is a council meeting. There will be time at the end of the meeting for questions from the audience. I remembered this time.
We forgot about
I
that.
kept
yeah.
forgetting that one. Okay, so that's 3.8. We have also pulled 311.
Yes.
Thanks, Emma.
I pulled this one, just because I was interested in the second part, 2018 Recreation and Services Commission Work Plan, and I just wanted to point out the overlap with the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee's work, who's already dealt with some of these things in the past and maybe will again. But I wanted to just flag that there's overlap between Parks, Trails and Greenways and with the community center. So whether the community center advisory committee,
Whatever we call the
Yeah.
steering committee.
the work plan involves work to do with the community center.
Is this?
I don't know why Parks Trails.
No,
Yeah.
this has got to do with the
Sorry.
work plan of the rec commission. Had a bunch of things in it,
It's the
not just
second
this,
attachment,
I see.
it's not just disco.
page 114.
So all I wanted to flag was that there's overlap, and I wondered if we wanted to defer, I'm sorry to keep using this word, but defer this work plan until we've seen some of the other work plans, or until we've had our strategic planning discussion, because we've also added a new committee today, the Housing Committee, and I'm interested at some point in discussing an environment and climate committee, because we've got those kinds of programs already happening. And I wondered if we might have a committee's discussion at strategic planning, because we're 3 years in, right? And it just sort of seems like I don't want to keep adding committees and noticing overlaps and not saying anything. I think we should think about how they all fit together. So I was going to ask to defer the second recommendation. What was the second? But I see Sean is here, she could maybe speak to you.
Okay, so before I get to you, Sean, I'm going to go to Allison and then Melanie.
The recommendation is that we receive it for
Information, that's
information.
all.
We are not being asked to approve it. And so I have no problem with receiving it for information. I mean, from a due process perspective, I would hope that the managers of the two different departments do sit down and compare their plans and talk with one another. And I would also hope that maybe there should be a joint meeting between the Recreation Commission and Parks and Trails, because there is overlap. Parks and Trails sort of ends up holding the parks, but if Rec doesn't want those parks, then what's the point of Parks and Trails creating them if they're going to be active parks? So I think there is some.
I wasn't suggesting that we solve all these issues, I was just suggesting that we have a discussion later.
Okay, but as far as the item on the agenda,
I'm
we are
quite happy to.
simply receiving their work plan. I don't think we
Okay.
want to not receive their
Okay,
work plan
all right,
because they may
that's it.
conflict.
I just pulled it to
I
make
think-
those comments, and that you're right, it says received, not approved, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I agree with you on this one, but I think Councillor Foss has raised an interesting point for our strategic meeting, and that is the whole subject of committees. Our emphasis has shifted, obviously, since we started in 2015. So therefore, to look at the standing committees and the committees we have with the whole view of eliminating wastage and overlap is very pertinent. And I'm taking Councillor Foss's point, probably in a broader sense, to add it to our strategic meeting, because what was relevant in 2015 could well be partly redundant in 2018. And the whole subject of committees would certainly be something we should scan over to see what needs to be done and possibly what needs to be eliminated, because otherwise I see us doing the typical government thing, just loading us up with tiers and tiers on this waiting game till it topples over. We need to remove some of these redundant, or combine some of these committees.
You know, and just, I want to jump in for a moment here. In a broader sense, our setup between Parks and Recreation is a bit goofy, right? I mean, most places are Parks and Recreation. Parks are created to provide recreational space for the recreation programs, whereas we have our recreation programs one place and our parks become more nature preserves as a separate thing. And I think probably a meeting between Bonnie and Shauna to work out how this integration would more properly suit the needs of the community at this point, because it's definitely our demographic and size and population so on is changing enough that it's probably just about time to take this one seriously. I'm going to go to Sue Ellen and then I'll come to you, Alice.
I just
Sorry.
speak to that.
I'll get to you, yeah.
Okay. In our discussion, I hope that we will also talk about training. I thought there might be some workshops that would be useful, or some other sort of support for our committees and commissions, because I think that's also important, whatever that might be. I've got some ideas, we can talk about it together, but I didn't want anybody to think that I didn't think the volunteer work was valuable. I do think it's valuable. I'm just concerned to see the overlap and what I perceive as overlap, and to think about how could we best use the time of our volunteers and the time of staff, who it also comes to twice, right? So, okay.
Allison?
Well, there's two recommendations on here, and because the minutes have been pulled, we've got to deal with both of them. But just from a history perspective, it used to be the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Right.
And having sat on that, we found that it was being consumed, the time was being consumed by dealing with referrals for park dedication for rezonings and subdivision approvals. And not enough emphasis and time was being spent on the recreation side. So that's sort of the background of why we ended up splitting it up and creating the two committees. So, but there's clearly overlap between the two committees, and there's also overlap between BIMTAC and Parks and Trails, I think. So it's a good discussion to have at the strategic planning session. So I would like to move the recommendation that council direct staff to investigate the feasibility of installing a disc golf course on underused municipal parkland, And the second recommendation, and that council receive the 2018 Recreation and Community Services Commission work plan for information.
A second one.
Okay, before I call the question, we got lunch on this season.
I was getting hungry.
So, yes, I agree, there's lots of overlap, and I just wanted to let council and mayor know that Bonnie and I have met and gone out to all of the parks, the municipal parks on the island, and have discussed a number of ways to activate some of those parks, and a lot of that may be coming through some of the recreation programming, probably starting in the spring. So, for example, rather than holding seasonal events and everything kind of based around the school, we might do something like a teddy bears picnic at the Cates Hill Park, or we have recently had a delegation with regards to the disc golf about looking at that in some of the municipal parks at the commission, Recreation Commission as well. So Bonnie and I are working closely together. A lot of the overlap has come from the rec plan and the parks plan, and the overlap in terms of sport courts and skate parks and things like that is clear, that we heard from both evidence of that in both the surveys done for each of those plans.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Oh, are we at the end?
No. We have to reconvene the meeting after the public hearing,
All right.
which we already did, but now we have a couple of items. You will see number 13. And that is Daniel, back. Area 1, Lot 2. We're giving it a third reading now.
Just notice there's cookies in there.
Tell him.
Yeah, or the crumbs. He's fine.
It's fine, don't worry.
He's fine, so-
See the spill, see the spill.
The dog's more interesting than you are, Dad. Yeah.
He's on his regular, he says, it's lunchtime, I gotta go clean up crumbs. Yes.
So thank you. So this is third reading of bylaw 438. So the public hearing was just held, so I thought I wouldn't give you another presentation of the same information from the public hearing. But earlier today in the council meeting, council adopted the housing agreement bylaw. So following third reading, that would be registered on title, and I believe that we've just scheduled a special council meeting December 4th, so that's when council could give consideration. If council gives third reading today, council could consider adoption at the December 4th special council meeting. In the council report, I've just put options for council. So after the following of a public hearing, council can give third reading immediately, or if council feels they need more time to weigh the comments made and comments received, they can do third reading at a future date. So we're recommending third reading today, but if council feels they need more time to consider all the comments received, then that could be postponed.
Dan, did council get third and fourth reading right now?
So we had done third to then register the housing agreement before adoption. So that would be the hold up, and it was just adopted today, so we'll register it. Yeah.
Okay. So, all in favor of giving third reading to bylaw number 438?
Move the recommendation.
Okay, good. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, in view of the amount of comments received, I think we can move right ahead.
Okay, so that's it, right? We're now down to question period. Sorry. I lose track.
Do I get to ask questions?
You can ask, yes.
Go.
Okay, first of all, I want to assure councilors who are in favor of having beach access. I want to provide this. I want to make a swap. In the report to council last week, planning said that the charter provision, which allows, in this particular case, where a highway ends at the water, that if you are granting something that is equal or better, they can allow a part of it to be traded. The catch-22 that I'm trying to work through is that the Land Titles Act says that it has to be 20 meters wide. So that report says it has to be 20 meters wide. Therefore, can't give an encroachment into it. What was the essence of that report that went to council last week. And so I'm still trying to work my way through, including notions of putting the title in trust until this can be worked out in order to get a permanent resolution about encroachment. And so just now, when it said I'm withdrawing what I'm trying to do, here's what I hope, that the things that we've asked for under the variance are relatively things like it had been granted in the past. It's under an existing roof to expand the kitchen. That was previously, the roof was approved in 1997 by the Islands Trust. And for, in line with that, to have a deck expansion, to proceed as a normal variance if possible, and with legal clarification that if it's possible legally to resolve my encroachments in exchange for beach access, then I would like to do it that way. So,
Right. No, we understand it.
Yeah,
It's not,
okay.
no, it's not that we don't understand. The thing is that in order to facilitate, accommodate, work through, even consider what you're talking about, we need a legal opinion
yeah.
to do it. Now, from the information I had from them before, it didn't appear that a legal opinion was really necessary. It seemed quite straightforward. Now you've convinced us that there is enough question here that we do need a legal opinion, so we have agreed to do that. Right? And so once we have the legal opinion telling us what we can do and what we cannot do, then we would be in a position to review whatever it is that you are proposing at that time. Because you will also be able to see it, Emma will see it, and we'll know what we're talking about.
Okay, so can I see that legal opinion
No.
soon?
No,
Oh,
you
right,
can't- you can't
sorry.
see the legal opinion.
No, you can't.
No.
Okay,
It's
so,
ours.
No, but staff can provide a synopsis of
Yeah.
legal opinion if so desired by council.
and could I see that synopsis sooner than?
Not till after council sees it.
Yeah.
We have
So
to do this
you
at a
don't
closed
get to see it until the 11th.
We,
Is that right?
yeah, we have to do this at a closed meeting whenever we deal with legal opinions. It's our procedure that we look at it first in a closed meeting before putting it out, and we may never put it out. It's a legal opinion. So you don't bring problems on yourself by sharing those things if you don't need to.
And it'll take, they can't turn it around tomorrow sort of thing, too.
That's going to take a while.
Do I get a rebuttal on this?
Well, you too may ask a question.
We only have
10 minutes. We only have 10 minutes in our agenda for these questions.
Yeah, as we know, there is lots of beach access on this island. This, as I said, this is a tiny one, this is not a huge beach, we're not opening up to a huge amount of, public to come down to spread themselves out some massive area. But if there's a certain, that covenant I gave you, I mean, I'm sure there's got to be some legality to it, that there's two people that are attached to that legal document, and now you're trying to change the whole legal document.
No. That legal document
That's
is
one
somebody
specific-
giving an easement to themselves over their own property, right?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
the original, like way back to the
Right.
original deed.
And it's a right to pass and repass.
Yeah, so
So it doesn't exclude others.
We can load it up,
you
yeah.
can load it on and more people
Well,
onto
you'd sign
that
a whole
one.
new easement.
Sure.
Create a new easement with
This one
everybody's
would still be
agreement.
valid.
What I'm getting at is,
I'm just not sure how that one works.
this has nothing to do with the topic at hand, which is our legal access to the sea, which this does not infringe upon. And from that legal access, moving on to the neighboring property, which is not yours, and whether or not, in exchange for that access to the sea in front of the other property, we allow some encroachments over our property, right? So it doesn't, your property isn't being affected directly, other than you perceive a future where people will walk down the public access to the beach that will be in front of your neighbor's
And then
house.
encroaching onto our
Can I just
side.
suggest, we're getting a legal opinion and that we just hold off on any
Yeah.
further public discussion on this at this time.
Can I
okay.
ask one thing about, this does not have a map attached to it.
Yeah, we don't know what that is.
No, I think I have a map actually. at
Well, the
home.
map should be attached to it, it would be part of the document.
Well, it doesn't seem-
But in the meantime, this variance that's now withdrawn, are we starting like sort of at scratch? Like, I'm not
The
sure where
variance
the
has not been
variance.
withdrawn. The variance is still proceeding.
We're
as
still
far as I
dealing
know.
with the DVP.
Yeah. DVP will be considered on December 11th.
Well, she said
He chose this.
I was withdrawing my,
Well, I'll get clarification from staff. As it stands now, DVP will be considered at the council meeting on December 11th. What we may have to do is, depending on the structure of the meeting, hold a closed meeting and then move back into an open meeting to discuss issuance of that DVP.
Here.
Or we may defer it.
Or you may defer it.
We may
Yeah.
defer it from that meeting.
My understanding of the process is that I believe the applicant for the DVP has indicated that they did not offer the beach access in consideration of the DVP being granted, but they wanted the beach access to be considered in dealing with the encroachment for the garage.
Right.
Correct. They should be two separate
We'll give
units.
this all in
So it's
writing.
either two separate things.
We
or
just,
three
we
different-
need it all in writing, we need our legal opinion. I
Yeah.
don't see the point of extending the meeting right now.
Yeah, we wanna go home.
We can't answer the question.
may do one more clarification. I've never yet to see the letter that was going to be offered about the municipality not having an immediate plan for the widening about the encroachment. There was going to be a comfort letter. I have not yet seen the comfort.
Oh, well, that was the staff thing. Yeah, I would
Probably
like,
later on.
I would like to see the comfort letter.
that's something between you and Emma.
I'll check it.
Okay.
And it could be an encroachment.
We are adjourned.